The image shows the trains prepared for the famous Crash at Crush event in Texas, organized by the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad in 1896. Held near Waco, the event attracted thousands of spectators, curious to see two steam locomotives collide head-on at high speed. Each train, carefully painted and positioned, represented a spectacle designed to entertain the public. This image captured the exact moment when the locomotives collided with full force. The trains, moving at high speed toward each other, crashed amidst a cloud of smoke and debris, providing the climax expected by the audience. The violent impact of the collision generated an explosion so intense that pieces of metal and wood were thrown everywhere, creating a scene of chaos and danger. After the crash, a crowd gathered around to get a closer look at the destruction left behind. The spectators closely observed the scattered debris, impressed by the scene of devastation before them. The accident at Dutchman's Curve was the deadliest train disaster in U.S. history, occurring in Belle Meade, Tennessee, on July 9, 1918, due to a communication error, where two passenger trains ended up colliding head-on at the curve. The lack of clear instructions and coordination between the teams created a perfect storm, placing the trains on a collision course. From another angle, we see a crowd approaching to observe the wreckage of the split train after the accident. In that period, rail transportation, although essential, was marked by tragedies, with devastating accidents showing the risks of an infrastructure still in development. This image captured during the Singleton Bank train accident shows one of the most impressive disasters of the time. In the image, derailed cars are stacked on top of each other in a chaotic and unstable structure, while a police officer walks along the tracks inspecting the scene in 1961 Wheaton, England. The force of the collision was so intense that some cars were thrown upward, ending up stacked on top of others, causing extensive destruction at the site. The Wellington Avalanche is remembered as one of the deadliest railway disasters in the United States, resulting in 96 deaths in March 1910. During a severe snowstorm in the Cascade Mountains, two trains from the Great Northern Railway, a passenger train and a mail train, became trapped on the tracks due to the accumulation of snow. After days of continuous snowfall, an avalanche descended with devastating force, hitting the trains and causing several cars to derail and fall into a steep ravine. The impact of the avalanche was so violent that the train cars were completely destroyed, leaving many passengers trapped between the wreckage. The remote location of the accident made it difficult for rescuers to access the victims, who faced harsh conditions while trying to reach them. Unfortunately, many passengers did not survive, succumbing to their injuries before help could arrive. A passenger train of the Boston and Maine Company derailed, causing a significant disruption in rail services in 1948. The derailment left cars off the tracks, some tilted and damaged, requiring a quick response from rescue and maintenance teams. In this second scene of the same accident involving the company, we see a man courageously positioned between the tracks, closely observing the chaos left by the derailment. In the photo, he is surrounded by damaged cars, while another train approaches in his direction. This accident occurred at the Mansfield Crossing, when a freight train collided with a passenger train on May 24, 1926. The impact was devastating, causing significant damage to the cars of both trains and resulting in several injuries among the passengers. In this other wider scene, it is possible to perceive the true magnitude of the collision impact between the freight train and the passenger train at the crossing. Twisted cars spread along the tracks show the force of the collision, while rescue teams and curious onlookers watch the destruction left by the accident. This photo captures the moment when this accident occurred on the Mattapan line involving a streetcar. During a routine operation, the streetcar derailed, causing significant damage to the tracks and the vehicle's structure. One of the derailed cars hit several trees along its uncontrolled path. The impacts further damaged the streetcar, leaving debris scattered and increasing the chaos of the scene. The trees, in turn, slowed down the car, possibly preventing more severe damage or an even more dangerous situation for the passengers and pedestrians nearby. A tragic accident occurred when a train operator, exhausted and asleep at the controls, ignored a series of automatic signals and warnings, colliding with the Hagenbeck-Wallace circus train, which had 26 cars. The high-speed impact tore through the first cars and destroyed 4 sleeper cars. The collision took the lives of 86 people, many of whom died instantly before the wreckage was consumed by fire. The Harrow and Wealdstone train disaster, which occurred on October 8, 1952, was one of the greatest railway tragedies in British history during peacetime. During the morning rush hour, 3 trains collided at the station in Wealdstone, Middlesex, now Greater London. The impact resulted in 112 deaths and 340 injuries, 88 of which required hospitalization. The Malbone Street wreck, also known as the Brighton Beach Line accident, was one of the deadliest railway accidents in U.S. history. On November 1, 1918, a train from the Brooklyn Rapid Transit, BRT, derailed and collided with a concrete wall in a tunnel on the Malbone Street line in Brooklyn, New York. The accident resulted in 93 to 102 deaths and over 100 injuries. The train was traveling at excessive speed, and the inexperienced engineer was unfamiliar with the sharp curves and steep inclines of the route. This railway accident at Quintonshill, near Gretna Green, Scotland, became the deadliest train disaster in British history. The collision was exacerbated by a devastating fire that consumed several cars on May 22, 1915. Firefighters can be seen in the background trying to extinguish the flames that spread rapidly, fueled by the flammable materials of the cars. The accident resulted in 226 deaths and hundreds of injuries. The Big Atlantic train accident occurred when the express train collided with a baggage car, resulting in many injuries on August 3, 1915. The impact was intense, leaving passengers and crew members injured due to the force of the collision. An accident on Chicago's North Line between Harrison Street and Wabash Avenue resulted in the derailment of 3 passenger cars in 1953. A calculation error caused the cars to stack up, creating a chaotic and dramatic image of cars piled up on the tracks. Just days after the tragic sinking of the RMS Titanic, a train accident occurred in Spring Hill, Kansas, near Woodland Connect, at the ramp from 199th Street to Woodland Road, on April 20, 1912. This accident deeply affected the local community, already shaken by news of the Titanic disaster. A tragic train derailment in New York, occurring on a Sunday morning after Thanksgiving, resulted in the deaths of 4 people and injured more than 60. This image is a retrospective of one of the bloodiest derailments in U.S. history, marking one of the most tragic events in American railroads. This locomotive number 321 of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, only 2 years old, suffered an impressive accident in Hartford, Connecticut on July 8, 1905. During a maneuver in the terminal, the locomotive lost control and broke through the station walls, partially projecting itself outside the building. Washington Union Station was the site of an impressive accident. On the day of the incident, the PRRGG 14876 locomotive pulling the Federal Express train from Boston experienced an air brake failure. Unable to stop, the train collided with a post and crossed the station lobby before crashing into the basement. The January 15, 1953 scene left the station partially destroyed, with cars scattered between the entrance and the basement. On the sharpest curve of the New York Central Main Line along the Mohawk River, the Lakeshore Limited train suffered a severe derailment, turning into a pile of steel debris with 9 cars off the tracks. The accident occurred as around 200 passengers slept on board, resulting in the death of the engineer, who remained in control until the impact, and 29 other passengers on December 19, 1940. The image captures an explosion of a steam locomotive boiler that unfortunately resulted in the death of a fireman, a brakeman, and an engineer in 1948 near Charleston Pike in Chillicothe, Ohio. The accident occurred when the boiler was operating with insufficient water, leading to overheating. When the crew attempted to add more water to cool the system, an immediate reaction occurred, with the water evaporating rapidly. This buildup of expanding hot gas eventually caused a fatal explosion. The only major accident involving the famous Super Chief occurred on January 25, 1948, when the locomotive lost braking ability as it departed from Union Station Passenger Terminal in Los Angeles. Unable to stop, the locomotive collided with a steel pole, causing considerable damage to the front of the train. Although the impact was strong, the accident did not result in fatalities. In Buster Keaton's 1926 film, The General, the most expensive silent-era scene was created, involving a real locomotive collision. In April 1926, location manager Burt Jackson found an old railroad in Central Oregon, which served as an ideal setting. The Oregon Pacific and Eastern Railway owned 2 Civil War-era locomotives, which were acquired for the film. A third locomotive was purchased to represent the Texas and was used in a dramatic accident scene where the train plunges off a burning bridge, creating one of the most iconic and costly sequences in silent cinema. This photograph captures a runaway Penn Central train that invaded the Southeast Expressway in Boston on August 21, 1969. The locomotive, number 3182, stopped in the middle of the highway, surrounded by onlookers and authorities who are trying to assess the situation and direct traffic. The incident caused a major disruption in traffic, with the train blocking several lanes. A severe accident on the BMT 168th Street line in Queens sent a car off the elevated structure, falling onto the street below in 1929. The incident is remembered as one of the most chaotic events in New York's railroad history. The vintage photograph captures the impact of a head-on collision between 2 freight trains from the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad in Laurel, Maryland on July 31, 1922. The accident occurred at the Laurel Switch, where the locomotives and cars piled up in a chaotic scene of wreckage. A derailment occurred on Boston's Atlantic Avenue Elevated, involving cars 0311 and 0934 in 1928. Car 0311 was recovered, rebuilt, and continued to operate until 1957. Due to the damage, car 0934 had to be cut up to be removed from the accident site. The line, already facing a decline in ridership, was closed on September 30, 1938, although the structure was not demolished until 1942. A streetcar operator performing the movement of empty passenger cars in the Salem branch collided head-on with a freight train coming from the Georgetown departure line, just below the signaling tower at Junction Station on August 2, 1917. The accident occurred shortly after 10:30 p.m. and tragically resulted in the death of a fireman aboard the freight train. In this case, 2 freight trains from the Worcester and Nashua railroads collided head-on behind a cemetery on September 21, 1893, around 3:35 a.m. The violent impact resulted in the death of a fireman, injuries to an engineer, the destruction of the Boscawen and Hollis locomotives, and significant damage to 13 freight cars. Rumors pointed to an error in the Ayer telegraph office as the cause of the accident. An accident near McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, left one of the largest locomotives of the Pennsylvania Railroad in an alarming position on June 5, 1944. During a maneuver, a freight train derailed while passing through a switch, throwing the locomotive off the tracks. Unfortunately, the locomotive's fireman lost his life in the incident. The enormous engine remained tilted and unstable. This photo captures an accident involving N and W Class 613 locomotive, which occurred near Bristol, Virginia in 1957. The powerful steam locomotive, part of the Norfolk and Western Railway fleet, collided in a critical section, causing extensive damage to the cars and surroundings. The impact was so intense that the locomotive was left tilted and partially destroyed, with rescue and maintenance teams quickly mobilized to handle the wreckage. This accident occurred at York Station, involving a train traveling from Sunderland to York in 1958. The train derailed as it approached the station, resulting in the disruption of rail service. Despite the severity of the incident, fortunately, there were no fatalities. The quick response of rescue teams and the passengers' luck helped avoid a greater disaster. A train accident on the Zigzag Railway attracted great attention and was widely reported in the press and immortalized in postcards. The incident occurred on April 4, 1901, on one of the railway's most challenging sections, known for its sharp curves and steep inclines. A failure in the locomotive's control led to the derailment, resulting in significant damage to the cars and tracks. The image shows a serious train accident in 1933, where the cars and locomotive derailed, spreading across the ground around the tracks. People are walking around the wreckage, assessing the damage and looking for possible survivors. This type of disaster highlighted the limitations of the safety and communication systems of the era, when human errors and technical issues were more frequent. A train accident in Essex drew attention due to the severity of the impact. The collision occurred when a passenger train derailed, resulting in cars overturned and scattered along the tracks in July 1961. Rescue teams and onlookers quickly gathered to help the injured and assess the damage. This accident involved a Boston and Maine Railroad freight train in Somerville, Massachusetts, with locomotive number 4005. The locomotive and several cars derailed, leaving a trail of debris along the tracks. Such accidents with freight trains were common in the early 20th century, especially on busy railroads, where the intense transportation load increased the risk of mechanical failures and derailments. The accident at Mosholu Parkway Station involved the derailment of a train on an elevated New York City subway line in 1952. The impact caused significant damage to the cars, leaving them tilted and making debris removal challenging. The photo captures a dramatic derailment near the Hearst Building on the elevated line over Hearst Square in Chicago in the 1940s. The train went off the tracks, leaving cars tilted and hanging from the elevated structure, while rescue teams and onlookers gathered in the streets below to observe the scene. This type of incident underscored the need to enhance inspections and maintenance to ensure the safety of Chicago's busy transport lines. In this image, Oregon Railroad and Navigation Company steam locomotive number 47 derailed on a challenging section of the Columbia River Gorge in the 1880s. The accident occurred in one of the railway's most dangerous areas, where narrow tracks ran along steep cliffs beside the river. The locomotive and some cars left the tracks, leaning precariously close to the edge. A significant accident occurred at Stoughton Station, Massachusetts, when a train derailed and fell into the station area between 1917 and 1934. The locomotive overshot the tracks, breaking barriers and causing severe damage to the station structure. Despite the severity of the incident, information on injuries or fatalities remains unknown in most news reports. In the United States, a locomotive derailed and lost control, resulting in a devastating fire in the mid-1920s. The machine, tilted and engulfed in flames, became unrecognizable as the fire quickly consumed the structure and spread intense heat around. The World War II photo shows the Deutsche Reichsbahn, German State Railways, DR-210 steam locomotive after being struck in an air raid in the city of Munster. Such attacks were common during the conflict, with railways frequently targeted to disrupt troop movements and supplies. This image captures the moment when locomotive 5203 violently collided with a car that crossed the tracks at the time of impact on August 14, 1937. The accident left the vehicle completely destroyed, reduced to twisted pieces of metal under the weight of the locomotive. A tragic end for this vehicle that passed at the wrong moment on this railway. The image shows a train accident in Maine that occurred in 1926, where the locomotive derailed and overturned in a dive into the ground. The locomotive rests on its side along a damaged, elevated structure with debris scattered around. Operators and workers observed the damage, assessing the chaotic scene. Logging cars of the St. Paul and Tacoma Lumber Company derailed on a flat railway, leaving massive logs scattered along the tracks and surrounding area in 1922. The extreme weight of the loads and the track conditions contributed to the accident, which caused significant damage to the cars and temporarily disrupted timber transportation. This type of derailment was a constant risk in heavy freight operations, especially on lines handling materials such as massive logs. In this image, a steam engine collided with a telephone pole between the years of 1883 and 1885. With the impact of the collision, the telephone pole snapped in half, causing a crash that startled everyone around. Wood and metal fragments were thrown, creating a tense scene as workers and spectators observed the damage. This railway accident involving the Boston and Maine Railroad, B&M, occurred in North Woburn, Massachusetts. The collision resulted in significant damage to the cars and the surrounding infrastructure, creating a scene of chaos and debris along the tracks. Rescue and maintenance teams were mobilized to provide aid and restore line operations. The aftermath of the Penn-Mainmar train accident showed the extent of the destruction caused by a derailment. The accident occurred on a coastal stretch in North Wales when a passenger train lost control and went off the rails in 1950. Cars leaned and were damaged, with parts scattered along the tracks and nearby areas. Rescue and maintenance teams worked intensely to remove the debris and assist the injured. In this incident, the force of the impact launched one of the cars directly against the station, creating a chaotic and unexpected scene in mid-1949. The car, off the tracks, leaned against the station structure, surprising staff and passengers present. In this incident, a train derailed on an elevated track on Beach Street in New York's Chinatown neighborhood between 1917 and 1934. The accident caused the locomotive and some cars to leave the tracks, leaving them dangerously tilted and threatening to fall onto the busy urban area below. Such incidents on elevated lines were real safety challenges in densely populated areas, where any failure could have severe consequences for local residents and businesses below. A streetcar train accident occurred between Forest Hills and Milton, involving a streetcar derailment in a busy area between 1917 and 1934. Amid the confusion and damage to the tracks and the train structure, an unusual scene caught attention. A small dog was seen running away from the site, apparently frightened by the chaotic situation. In the photograph, a damaged car is seen with railway workers posing next to it on August 4, 1910. The men are alongside the partially destroyed vehicle, which appears to have been involved in a railway accident. This type of record was common at the time, documenting both the impact of accidents and the actions of the teams working to restore order on the railways. On a snowy morning, the luxurious Oriental Limited train traveling from Seattle to Chicago on December 18, 1909, derailed as it passed through what is now Spring Rock Park. Known for its comfort and being electrically lit throughout, the train was a symbol of luxury and kept in impeccable condition. However, a broken rail caused it to derail at 4 a.m., tearing more than 200 feet of trackbed and tipping onto its side. A train coming from Enniscorthy lost control upon arriving at the station and was unable to stop. The locomotive broke through the bumpers and shattered the station wall, sending debris flying along Hatch Street, Dublin, on February 14, 1900. Despite the severity of the accident, there were no fatalities. However, the driver, William Hyland, suffered severe injuries and had his right arm amputated at the scene. This image captures the freight train accident that occurred in Rahway, New Jersey on March 3, 1930. Two Maine Central Railroad cars are impressively stacked after the derailment, with one car tilted on top of the other, creating an unstable and chaotic structure. The impact damaged several cars and interrupted traffic on the line, requiring a quick response to remove the debris and restore rail operations of the time. This impressive train accident occurred in a neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro. The train derailed, resulting in a chaotic scene with tilted cars and considerable damage to the tracks and surrounding infrastructure. The incident occurred on September 23, 1954, and drew the attention of residents and curious onlookers who quickly gathered to view the wreckage and understand the extent of the disaster. During a heavy snowstorm, a train accident occurred in Karjala, Finland. The collision involved a train that derailed in extreme weather conditions, making visibility and track operations difficult in 1957. In the image, a second car is seen at the site providing assistance and conducting an investigation into the tragic incident. This photograph captures the moment when the Russian Imperial train suffered a serious accident near Borki, resulting in the derailment of several cars on October 17, 1888. The impact was devastating, with the dining car being completely crushed, causing the deaths of several people and injuries to others. The Imperial family who was on board survived the disaster, although some members sustained minor injuries. This photo shows a train from the Northern Pacific Railroad, which derailed in 1903 at the top of the trestle on the S-curve in the Coeur d'Alene cut near Moulin, Idaho. The accident occurred in a winding and elevated section, where the tracks followed a challenging S shape over a trestle, resulting in cars hanging over the structure in a desperate scene. The tragic Cassano d'Adda accident in Italy occurred when the powerful Pacific FS steam locomotive collided with the last car of a train that was stopping at the station on February 7, 1956. The force of the impact was devastating, completely crushing the rear car and resulting in a scene of destruction and horror. Many passengers aboard the affected car suffered serious injuries, and the incident was remembered as one of the most terrible of the time. The image depicts an accident where a train derailed and escaped from an elevated platform in Forest Hills between 1917 and 1934. The train left the tracks and stopped in a dangerous position on the structure, threatening to fall onto the street below. Boston's Back Bay Station was the scene of an unprecedented train accident. A train derailed as it entered the station, causing significant damage to the tracks and the cars involved in 1948. The impact left some cars tilted and spread debris throughout the location, while passengers and staff were quickly evacuated. Sometime later, rescue and maintenance teams arrived at the site to control the situation and restore station operations. The Eden train wreck, a passenger train known as the Missouri Pacific Flyer from the Colorado and Southern Railroad, was carrying more than 500 passengers, mostly families and children, when it was struck by a sudden flood on August 7, 1904, near Eden, Colorado. As the train passed through a steep canyon, heavy rains caused a flash flood that came down the canyon with tremendous force, colliding with the train and causing it to derail. The image records a devastating train accident from the 1920s, with completely destroyed and derailed cars along the tracks. Several onlookers and rescue teams gather around the wreckage to observe the scene and assess the damage. The force of the impact resulted in a pile of cars scattered across the terrain around the tracks. This train accident in Finland in 1957 occurred during an intense snowstorm, a complicated situation for most transportation at the time. The lack of effective communication between the locomotive crew and dispatchers was identified as one of the contributing factors to the incident. Only after the accident did the railway company decide to implement a radio system, allowing continuous and safer communications between the crew and the central offices. An express train coming from Granville, trying to make up for lost time for its 131 passengers, accelerated beyond the limit. With the failure of the air brake, the train overshot the tracks and crossed the station lobby, breaking through a wall and crashing down to the street below. This impressive accident occurred on October 22, 1895, at the Montparnasse station, also called Gare de l'Ouest, in Paris. In total, a woman who was on the street was struck by masonry debris and lost her life. Additionally, 2 passengers, the train's fireman, and 2 guards sustained injuries in the accident. From a wider angle, it is possible to better observe the extent of the tragic accident at Montparnasse. Surprisingly, the locomotive suffered only minor damage and was taken to a repair station. After repairs, both the locomotive and the passenger cars returned to operation, continuing to run on French lines even after the incident. This photo shows the aftermath of the train accident at Irk Valley Junction, which occurred on August 15, 1953 at 7:40 a.m. An electric train bound for Manchester from Bury ran through a stop signal and collided head-on with a steam train heading to backup. The front carriage of the electric train was thrown and plunged about 40 feet to the riverbank below. The accident resulted in the death of the electric train's driver and 9 passengers.